Hello. Welcome once again to Conscious Aging. Our season is going forward this week with a triple wallop of talent. All three of us, all three of our guests are retiring for a second chance, or a third chance in some cases, and we will all benefit. But before we re-meet them, we remind you that this series continues into April and comes to you via the wisdomfactory.net. Da-da-da.
And you can register here under bit.ly/conscious aging and written with little letters. While you find the program, if you want to see the whole program, by bit.ly/conscious aging with C and A from conscious and aging in big letters.
Yeah.
Okay.
We are coming to you today from sunny, today only, Paradiso Integrale in Umbria, Italy, after a long and wet winter.
And wait a minute. We say that there are here the mimosas. They are already dying, but these are the flowers in Italy for today, because today is the 8th of March and is the La Festa della Donna.
Yeah.
How is it called in English?
We don't say it.
No, Women's Day.
International
Women's Day. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And I'm Mark Davenport. And
I'm Heidi Hörnlein.
Yeah. Are you? All right. Okay. You're in the right place. And she's going to tell you a bit about how to watch the show today.
We have done that part. This is Gero.
Aren't you?
Gero moment. Okay. You now present our guests.
I thought you were going to add something else also.
Oh, what shall I add?
I don't know. I forgot. Okay. But thank you, Heidi. And now we want you all to see the smiling faces of our guests. In no particular order, Susan Farling, can you say hi?
After unmuting yourself.
Oh.
You have to unmute yourself on top.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm delighted to be here, and it's just an absolute treat. I'm looking forward to this conversation very much.
Okay. And Mona Fuvat. Hello, Monia. Are you unmuted?
She is disappeared.
Oh.
Okay, let's go to Tom.
Yeah, okay.
Hello, am I here?
Yeah. Yes, you are.
All right, well, I am here.
Welcome, Tom. Well,
I have no script, which is a way I love to come to an event like this, and that means, serendipity or perfect channeling of the Great Spirit or whatever. I'm looking forward to what happens here.
Excellent.
Yeah, and for people who want to find out what they did before in the Wisdom Factory, you can go to the archive or to the previous seasons of Conscious Aging. And now I see Monia has come back.
She's back.
Okay.
All right.
With my camera, something's but I'll do my best to switch myself in. And,
okay.
Yeah,
we will come later on. I would like to ask everybody to give a very short presentation of who they are, where they are, and why they are interested in the topic.
Okay.
Who wants to start?
I'll lead off. I don't know what I'll say anyway, so let's find out. I'm Tom Christensen in Mineral Point, Wisconsin, the first city ever created in Wisconsin. It's a city full of artists, agribusiness, 2,400 people, a wonderful little village to live in. And let's see, I'm interested here because I've been studying for the last 16 years very seriously human development. How is it that we change over time? Especially how does our cognition change over time? And I have a few things that might be valuable, and there's a lot to learn in that area. So that's where my interest is in the conversation.
And that's why you're here for this discussion.
Yeah,
yes.
We haven't said yet what the title is.
We didn't, do we?
Zero Transcendence.
Zero. You know, I want to make that mistake a lot. Gero Transcendence, and is gerontology or geriatrics. Gero Transcendence. Okay.
Okay, let's go first to Susan, maybe. Maybe Monia, you can still figure out how to get into your video.
Trying my best.
Okay. You must unmute yourself, Susan.
Thank you. So my interest in gerotranscendence is quite personal as well as professional. As I age, I look for models. I get a great deal of stimulation and excitement when I hear about new research that's being done. There seems to me to be quite a redefinition of what it means to age and what the possibilities are in aging. My professional background is as a psychotherapist and counselor in private practice for 30 years. I'm moving now into coaching people in retirement. So I'm using what I learn personally in my professional work as well. I'm in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, surrounded by ocean and mountains. And spring has sprung here. The cherry blossoms are out and starting to flutter.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Time now.
That's good. Okay.
So let's see how far Monia has come.
The camera isn't recognized by Google Hangout, so you have just to take my voice.
Oh, it was so nice to see your face before.
Yeah, I was there before we started. Now it's sort of refused. Yeah, well, I'm living in Vienna, in the center of Europe. We had a very hard winter, and I caught, after 20 years, I caught the flu, and I'm still, my nose is still blocked, so I'm still not really on the top of my voice and maybe even my thinking. And the topic, gerotranscendence, interested me because my mother, who died at 92, age 92, developed a lot of theta waves. I think it's called theta waves.
Theta waves, yeah,
without ever having meditated before. And so this is not mentioned in the text you gave us, but still I'm interested in the physical effects of gerotranscendence. And yeah, I've experienced it myself. I'm 76 now, and we'll see how it works out. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
I'm still wondering why that happened, that you are not visible today.
Yeah.
I wonder, Bo, if you can get out again and try to come in again.
I went out 2 times and it didn't work.
It didn't work. It was strange. Anyway, Mark has scripted the introduction, and he's he wants to get it to an end. Okay, you get it.
Well, I wanted to brag about the little technological miracle that, thank you, Heidi, has come to our screen with our 3 guests and both of us all together at the same time, except for Monia. A little problem with the video. Yeah, only half there. But it was worth the effort, as we all have an interest, both professional and personal, as others have mentioned, in the idea of gerotranscendence, which is a kind of entering into a phase of life when interests and values can be seen from a new perspective, to be aware and articulate about those changes. Some might say it's a new, previously unrecognized period of life. And it's interesting to note that it is simultaneously the fastest growing segment of the population. So maybe we should start with what's gerotranscendence.
Yeah, and for that, I want to say that we came to the idea of do this panel discussion because somebody of us came across a paper which is published on thewisdomfactory.net/Gero-Transcendence, and you can download it there. It's called Gero-Transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
And so we thought we'd talk about it.
Yeah.
What is Gero-Transcendence in your understanding? I heard already from Monia that her mother developed theta waves in her brain. How did you find it out? Did she make a scan or something?
We had it measured at the doctor. Just wanted to know in what shape she was. And yeah, so, and having never meditated in her life before, as I have since I've been 30, I'm wondering if everybody develops it and if you are able to recognize this tendency in you. And yeah, that's so it's a very upright, measurable way or approach to this topic of challenge.
Yeah. Maybe we should say to people who are not familiar what that means, that when people meditate, our normal state of consciousness is beta waves in the brain. And then we go down to alpha waves, which we have when we dream, and then we go down beta and theta waves, and they're almost shorter and shorter and shorter. And when you go very deep in meditation, you get there. And then it is astonishing that a person who gets very old is developing these waves in the brain. So, okay.
Which often are confused with almost pathological states by people who are younger and not there yet, one way or another.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to you. Who wants to respond?
Who would be next?
I've got something to say about that. And you can hear me fine?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
It was somewhere in the past 5 years or so, I was looking at spiritual disciplines and the notion of transformation and how most people that get into the spiritual disciplines are looking for some sort of enlightenment at somewhere down the road. And as far as I know, there aren't monasteries or ashrams full of these people getting enlightened. And I began to be suspicious that maybe all the discipline that the teacher gives they're good disciplines. They develop the mind in a certain way, but they don't do anything in terms of fostering vertical development. And if that's the case, then all they are is holding pens until it happens. Then I began researching, well, who knows how to make people transform, like mature vertically, like become more towards that ideal of the saint or an enlightened person we've heard of. And I can't come across anybody that's got any reliable techniques for getting us to be what we will be somewhere down the road. And that left me with thinking, well, then it's just something that happens. And there is comments in the literature that, yes, some people continue to mature over a full lifetime, and other people stop their maturation in a vertical sense early in life. So there's that whole range of how high, there's a loaded term, but I usually think of maturation as increased cognitive complexity. What that means is that the scope of what we attend to broadens, really gets wider. So it even gets beyond our identity to where we can perceive and hold present that which is really bigger than we were before. And we can experience bigger than we were before. Now that's quite different from horizontal improvement, where you just add a lot more information. And that's very meaningful in itself, but those are two very distinct ways of growing. So when I came across this paper where it says, only 25% of the people that he polled got to this self-identity transcendence thing, it says, well, that makes sense, because some people are going to get there and some people aren't. And that's where I'm left with, is that, oh, this sounds pretty natural. The guy figured it out, that people grow or they don't grow, and there isn't much you can do about that. And I'll leave that to anybody here to comment on.
Are you speaking of the paper that we mentioned here a couple of minutes ago? The one from, what's his name? Lars, the Swede.
Oh, hi, Lars.
Okay.
Yeah, he's asking if you mean that paper from Lars Torsten or Tonston. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. He's talking about the same paper. Good. Yeah. Okay. Oops, somebody's muted or nobody's talking, one or the other.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. I would like to just comment, Tom, on what you just said about there's nothing you can do about that, whether you develop or not in that vertical way that you're speaking of. And from my perspective, I think interest, passion, drives development sometime. I think that there are people who definitely live in what I kind of think of as the material realm, and others who don't, and that it is possible to further one's development consciously, and that and I feel like I personally am an example of that. I've consciously attempted to move into that place of being able to let go of such identification with myself and to move into the larger identification. I've had some fabulous examples around me of elders who have apparently done that, and to witness that unself-conscious but beautiful landing in the moment from an elder who has both been a meditator and a Quaker and a very conscious human being, but then to witness that development happening apparently very naturally, as well as consciously, whether they're separate or not, don't know, but it's a wonderful thing to witness. This is a person that I've known for a number of years, and her beloved partner recently passed, and to see her go through a crisis, accessing the wisdom and the awe, the ability to connect, the awareness of the temporary nature of life, all with grace and lightness, is just a marvelous thing. And I see her from my perspective as one of the most truly enlightened people that I have lived with or been in community with. So I know I went on a couple of tangents there. So that's
wonderful to be able to witness that happening in others.
Yes.
Monica is waiting.
Okay.
I was just checking. It's about 20 minutes, and it's the first time I have to mention Ken Wilber. But he produced a book called Integral Life Practice with various methods. And on one page he says, it won't really produce a result, but it will help that results may happen. So meditation, of course, is one of the practices, but you actually practice your whole life being alive and being aware. And for myself, I'm very happy that I found Wilber at the turn of the century and found his map and explained some of the things that had happened before, because otherwise I wouldn't have known. When you check all the old traditions, it's in their language. It's in an old-fashioned language of that cultural sphere. And Wilber wrote that down in a very comprehensive and very easily to understand way. And I wonder why we don't, in Austria, why we don't use it more in medicine and in old age care. but of course, new ways always take their time to happen. And there have to be as many people as possible who can represent it. And that well, what's the matter with the person? Why is she so happy? Why is she, why doesn't she really care about what her ego will I found that, well, I fix this. But many people at this age group in Transcendence are no longer, don't take themselves very seriously. Well, I did it already at age 40, 45. And that was rather frowned upon because you have to take yourself seriously, particularly when you are in groups. And that was quite a funny experience. And I thought to myself, well, maybe I should, but then I decided no. So humor is a significant sign for me that people transcend. Thank you.
Yeah,
well, that's an easy route for me too.
I want to say that it brings me to the idea or to the fact that younger people cannot imagine that older people feel and think and see life from a completely different perspective, and they fear age. And I think one of the young people,
yeah.
and we have in this paper, which we named and which you can download on the website, there is clearly shown that the older you get in average, the less you fear becoming even or more old or even die. Mm-hmm. So how can we bridge that gap? How can we tell young people that we are not crazy when we lose our ego, when we are not so interested anymore in competition and in working, running around like crazy, but that we are doing other things and with more calmness. And it's not a sign of illness, but a sign of well-being. What is your idea?
If I may again, the classic Hindu tradition has given us an answer to that. Way back somewhere, they broke the life up into 4 sections. And the last section was where you renounce everything. You can roughly break them up into 25-year segments. You learn for 25 years, you have a family for 25 years, then you study and meditate and do your spiritual practices for 25 years. Then the last 25 years, you leave everything, go to the woods and look for enlightenment. The wisdom in that is that the culture knew that there was something different happening in stages of life. And one of those is when you let go of everything, your children, your wife, your spouse, everything. And so it was no surprise when it occurs in that culture. The Nordic cultures, with their notion of Bildung, took care of some of that as they brought the farmers out of the fjords into the industrial cities and said, boy, we have to show these people, what it means to grow into an adult. And that maturation path was laid out and taught right down to little farm groups, just common people learning it. So they knew what the path was ahead. We don't have in the Western culture a built-in, of course, model about change over lifespan. So, I mean, it's just an overwhelming task, but that sort of template needs to be fed into the culture. Then, all right, this is what's going on for me. I get to achieve, go after everything, and I'm not going to be interested in doing this my whole life. Look at Grandpa. Look how happy he is. He's not even afraid of anything. That's where I'm going to be someday. But without that model, we just see deterioration because it's not what I am at 25.
Yeah. Yeah, we look at Grandpa and we wonder what's wrong with him. He's going to die, just let him rock away in his chair and our life will go on.
I would like to acknowledge some viewers who have shown up here in the comment stream. There is Bruce Winkler and there's also Gina Donaldson. And she asked, do you think that people realize they should grow or actually decide not to grow? Any idea about that?
I don't think there's much motivation found in sort of what we might call mature people, that is, people before 65, 70, to look forward to anything. When they retire, people feel like they're going to finally do the things they've always wanted to, but they're really just projections of what they're already doing. So today, yeah, for the most part.
I think one of the things you're pointing at is that, like, we conflate vertical transformation, the development of depth, and the acquisition of code. So I might be really mature, but if I don't have any language to talk about it, I can't communicate or affirm or even enhance that. So it's real important that we keep those distinctions. I might be enlightened as anybody has ever been, but if I can't communicate anything about it, it's not going to be the same thing as if I've grown up in a tradition and now I can talk about it. Now, the other thing is depth. And depth is, to me, and really I must bow to Hansi Freinacht in his book, The Listening Society, for this insight. Depth is the elimination of all resistance to the tragedy in one's life. Okay, so there is tragedy. And we grow up looking the other way. I did, of course, and I think it's pretty common, is that, well, I'm too busy to pay much attention to that. But suddenly, like a crisis occurs, or I lose my baby, or I almost get killed in a car accident, a series of those, and eventually we aren't pushing those out of our awareness anymore. We just accept that. And that depth can come to anyone at any level of cognitive complexity. And that depth, we all know, we've met some elderly person that has no education, maybe sitting on a stoop outside of a little house in some little woods. And we just know we're in the presence of somebody special. They can't tell you anything. You walk away with great wisdom. They do not know about the expanse of the universe, but you're blessed in their presence. I think that's depth.
Yeah, and I just can respond to what Gina says. I have definitely noticed the greater awareness opening. It is amazing. I, of course, want everyone to grow because it is so wonderful. Yeah, I do think so too. My own experience, the older I get, the freer I feel. To things like that, for instance, to learn websites, to learn now the new broadcasting system. And that's really so difficult. And whoever would have thought that I'm doing all that stuff, technical stuff. I was a no-tech person, But it is frustrating, but it's also fun when you finally get it, Yeah. So, Susan, up to you.
I was just wanting to go back to I thought it was a marvelous question about how to bridge the gap between some aspect of gero-transcendence, or understanding that there's something very important and wondrous available for people who age in a way that is transcendent with younger people. And the model of mentoring, I think, is one possible way for there to be some formalized way in our society for older people to mentor younger people. I'm thinking right now, and I know there are aging and saging groups where that model's coming forward. I'm thinking right now too of places that I've seen where older people are paired with younger people in living situations, which I think is a marvelous way to do that. I actually think it's quite tragic when people live full lives and then say, oh, well, my time's done, game over, I'm fading off. Because all that marvelous knowledge, I think it's culturally really important that we pass it along. Pass it along with the shadings and subtleties that happen with aging, with that ability to think in complex ways. To pass on that that juicy but also well matured wisdom. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It's just an idea, Monia, a moment. I'm now learning open broadcast system and all this stuff. And when I know it, I would like to to you. And then we can stream to Twitch. And Twitch is a place where many young people are. And we can do something, the oldies show or something like that. And then they can come and listen to us, what we
Fantastic.
can.
I think it's a great idea. Bravo.
Okay, I invite you to collaborate with that as soon as I have figured out the things. Okay, Monia, over to you.
I was wondering about the aging and staging groups Susan mentioned. Do we have anything in Europe, like this in Europe? I haven't heard about anything like this. Of course, you might say that our Ken Wilber groups, maybe something like this now, come to think of it. And of course, what we are training is a greater complexity, as you mentioned, it's a greater complexity of thinking. And I have 3 grandchildren, and they know I'm authentic in what I do. And yeah, that's a great gift for them, to them, and their appreciation is a great gift to me. And I've always worked with younger people, so at least 20 years younger, and I never notice it because I feel as young as they are. And in our groups, we have many couples, and most of them are now approaching their 50s. And nobody wants to leave the evenings. They always just takes a little longer, and they sit around, and they really appreciate what they are offered and what they can experience.
I was going to say, Moni, that what I've heard about the groups that you're involved with, I think those could be models, for more of that in Europe. The groups I know about are hanging around the West Coast, they're in Boulder, places like this. Oh, in British Columbia. Excuse me, I neglected that. and there's these centers where things happen, but it's not perhaps unknown in Europe, just not recognized and not publicized, nobody's spreading the word one way or the other.
Maybe, Susan, you can explain a little bit, or also Tom, about these groups which are happening in America and Canada.
Please, Susan. I don't know the staging.
Okay.
Well, what I'm thinking of are groups that I've heard directly from people that are in my circles who tell me that they have these groups and how beneficial they are. Also, I've visited some websites. I think they were in the States, that were particularly for people who were consciously aging and wanting to do that with saging as well. I was going to say intelligence, but that didn't fit. So that's where I know. Also, I think there's in looking at retirement, because I've just completed a certification course in that. There's a whole awareness of how important life, the latter third, rather than dividing it into fifths, it seems to be divided into thirds in North America anyway, and how creative and expansive and growth providing that last third of life can be. I think that awareness is coming. So.
I'd like to step back to that comment about mentoring and being useful to those that are coming behind us, the younger generations. My experience is limited, but it keeps getting affirmed when I see a bright late 20s, 30, early 40s person and I share with them my insights about what's new about cognition at the leading edge of complexity, they get it. They get it immediately. Now, they should not be able to get it because they should have the same level of complexity I had when they were their age, and I don't see it. What I'm seeing is that they have the same, very close to the same complexity that it took me a lifetime to get. What's missing, and it makes sense to me when I look at it. I mean, all the data that's coming into our children is just compared to the black and white TV that wasn't even there when I was a child. That came later on. Now, all that's coming in, and every single thing that hits our mind leaves a record. So if you've got that level of impact, the brain is going to change. And it's creating a brain that's ready to have a global awareness very early. What's missing, you cannot have depth when you're young. And you could have it tragic. And I'm sorry to say there are some young people that have had lives like that. But in general, you're not going to have the depth. And you're also not going to have the code. You're not going to be able to speak about it because nobody's told you why you're different. And that's where we can offer something. When I say to this graduate student in English, I said, do you know you're using multi-perspectival cognition? This is, no, I just look at things from different points of view. I said, do you know that 30 years ago you couldn't find anybody that did that? You're a mutant. And probably the kind of mutants we need to make the planet work. So that's what we can offer, I think, to the younger ones is a mirror to say, look who you've become, and we need you this way. It's no accident. This is what we need to make the planet work. And that gives them great value and maybe purpose. And boy, if somebody would have told me that when I was young that I'm what the world needed, I think it might have shifted me a little bit.
Yeah. It's funny, I was what the world needed then.
Tom, you just mentioned global awareness.
Yes.
And of course, all this technology helps us with global awareness. But it's still our own center where you have to be centered. That you can tolerate it. Now they talk about resilience, and I wonder if we should call them mutants, but they're just going with their times. And I can really, what you said about being 30, then you were different. So was I. But I got some pushes. I didn't expect them, but I was sort of pushed beyond my limits and my conditioning. Without a crisis, that's what I really appreciate about this incarnation. I never had a crisis that was really like losing someone or deciding on an abortion or anything this way. So there are different ways, and again, sorry to quote Wilbur, he says it's not necessary to have a breakdown to go through. You can, transcend and include. So our values, the older generation, I want them included as well. I don't want them forgotten. And this is what I mentioned to my grandchildren. I tell them, at our times, things were this way, and how lucky you are that they are now different. And they understand what I'm talking about. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's much different times. And what you said, Tom, about the possibility of developing this multi-perspective, I think some people, the smarter ones, they sort of get it, but there are many people who probably feel overwhelmed, and especially when they don't have a good guidance, and they might not know what to choose and might, don't get a job and whatever. So how can we get these people in? I mean, the idea which I have, we might find some of these people to mentor, let's say. By the way, I have asked for one of our sessions, association who is offering that older people are mentoring young people. And they say they have so many older people who want to do that, but not enough younger people who want to have that. So it's a question of, let's say, the right publicity. So they declined to come in our sessions because they feared that they would get even more older people who offer their assistance, because they need to have recipients.
Yes, somebody to talk to. Yes, talk with.
Right. We need to find out where they are, because I really do think that there are many people who grow up without fathers and sometimes without mothers and without grandparents, and they would appreciate a perspective of an older person, like grandparents to rent, something like that.
You know, I think we have to, at least this is what's coming to me right now, is that I've often thought, yes, you know, I've had people that I coach, you know, they come to me for mentoring, and it's a blessing every time it happens, and I don't put myself out there as a professional doing this, but perhaps that isn't where people are getting their guidance anymore. You know, the media, the social media, you know, we have to post this and other things like that. This is where that information will be found by the younger generation. They're not going to walk down the block to the therapist's office and go in, because that's old hat. I mean, all the information is in their prosthesis right here. You know, they
so what we need is to find right titles. And Zero Transcendence, nobody would come from the younger people. This is more for older people to attract them and to think about it. And I find it really difficult to find the right descriptions when I post the things and the right titles, so that somebody we want to address is also attracted. So.
Yeah, I was earlier in the show thinking we should include some examples of the way our points of view have changed over the years, as there's so many examples in the paper that we've been speaking of. And then I realized that, but there aren't any young people listening to what we're saying. You know, it wouldn't make any difference. No. So we're talking to each other. We know what we're talking about. We've experienced it. We feel it. You know.
I would like to ask, in your personal experience, how this transcendence, a little bit, everybody has talked about it, but maybe we can say it to other people so that they can recognize that, oh, that's it, what I'm feeling. That's it, what and I thought I'm getting out of mind or whatever. So if everybody could say something of their own experience, how they realize that this is transcendent and not getting lost or something.
Well, I could certainly address that a bit, in that I've become a whole lot lighter as I've aged, as I take myself less seriously, and as I get able to move out of the tangle of personality. And even when, I mean, it comes up to get in the way of clear vision, but I can at least mostly, or more often at least, recognize it and not dive into it and not get lost in it, but rather just, oh, I know where you come from. And there's no need for me to go there. There's other far more interesting things in the world than my narrow vision when I go into that small place. So that's one perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to say that, okay, so there's no young ones listening to us. Really, who's listening to us is each other right here.
Yeah.
Well, okay, then what can we do here? Well, we can affirm that we're valuable as we are, and that each word we speak out into the world, like I've taken to speaking in groups, well, how big is our circle of care? Does it just take care of our personal, or does it take care of our group, or is it our city, or is it larger than that? Like we have a community foundation here, and there's a nice amount of money pouring into it for local things, and we park that money in an investment fund. And I said, what does that investment fund invest in? Oh, we don't know. I said, oh, so your circle of care is just locally here. What if they're investing in armament manufacturing? Oh, so just speaking a few notions like that wherever we happen to be is all we can do. But when we do it, I think it's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal because the whole world with everything we do, and most of it we're not aware of. And perhaps us maybe a little more than some other people, but most investors aren't really concerned about what they're investing in. They're looking for the return. They're looking for the bottom line, which is just what the corporation they're investing in is doing too. So what's the difference? We're all playing that same game if we don't continue to expand and become aware of it. Gosh,
I really,
yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Susan.
I really agree with Tom that speaking it into the world and to other people is of value. And I think this was touched on just a little bit before, and that is that we need language that that's in a way a new way of languaging, and also there's a whole, I think, culture of disempowerment that needs to be shifted. Disempowerment for the elders in our society. And I think that as I speak in whatever the forum is, that's one way to start shifting that heaviness, that cloud, that really disrupts our ability as a society to connect with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd also say that, go ahead.
About this empowerment of older people, we may be the first generation who is able to spend money and to be seen just by consumerism. Now, what do you spend your money on? Do you spend it on a new car every other year? No, you don't at your age. Do you spend it on lots of clothes? No, you don't. So I have been sponsoring organizations and people as long as I remember, just because that seems to be the natural thing to do when you have money to spare and you don't want to spend it on cosmetics or on jewelry. And that's a difference. So we get older. This generation gets a lot older. It's still healthier than the generations before. And what Heidi just mentioned, we all learn the social media and networking. My husband does them a lot. And he has developed a certain kind of humor. And he can take the perspective of the others. And that's quite, that's an evolution for him, because when he was in his 40s and 50s and he knew everything better, that was different. So we all develop all the time. And I'm happy about that. Yeah, and in this paper was also mentioned that there is less fear of death. And I have an 81-year-old friend with whom I am texting every day about 20 times, because that takes less energy than on the phone. When you phone with somebody, it is my experience, it takes much more energy to talk on the phone than to text something. So this is a method, the younger people, it's natural for them to text all the time. And that's, so how do we in our age group save our energy? That's a matter that keeps me thinking many times, because when I notice that something drains my energy, I put a stop to it. I didn't do that when I was younger because I had so much energy. But now you really know how to manage your energy when you are at a certain age group. You have to.
Which reminds me of some small thing that I've become aware of. We have a couple friends who are, what, 20 years younger? Yeah, 20 years younger than me, 10 younger than her, but still makes a big difference. The man has organized a film circle for this little town in Italy where they provide to the local cinemas, the projectionists basically, English language films. And we thought that's a wonderful idea, because we have a whole circle of expats, virtually all of whom speak English. And so this would be a way to meet. And then I'm finding that, I don't really care about going to the movies that often, It's just not something that matters too much to me anymore, especially on a cold winter night. And you don't get home until 11 p.m. No, thanks. So this is not to put down his efforts at all. He's enthusiastic about it, and there's a nice turnout for the films. And so that's great. But thanks. No, thanks.
Yeah, I want to say something similar. It was so important for me when I sang, to make a career and try to get concerts and try to do that and try to be known. And now I'm sort of, okay, it's not so important anymore, to become somebody and to put all this energy in something which is so, not only dependent on quality, but on many other things, on how you present yourself, how you get into connection, and what we in Germany, in German language, call vitamin B. That means relationships with the right people. And, the Me Too thing, which came up lately, this is certainly a part of many of these careers. And so will you really do that? When you are young, you still try and find, and I must get it, even when I don't play the game as they wanted, and it must come out something. And then chi me lo fa fa, they say in Italian. Who makes me do that?
Who can make me do that?
Who cares in English? So that is definitely a different approach. And there was a time, a passage where it was still sad and it was still unsatisfying and still sort of, you missed the mark and you didn't do what you could have done and you didn't explore your potential enough and blah, 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 blah. And after a while, even this goes away and it's okay, that was my past and that's it, and now it's something else. We do something else, which is different. And
yeah, this is the potential I've been waiting for all along.
I see this as landing in the moment with just openness to the moment, which is lovely. Yeah.
And there was something in the article that talked about the time perception. I don't know if you realize that too, but for me, every evening, before going to bed, we do a bit of qigong and meditation. And then I think, oh, is it evening again? It seemed just now, that the beginning of the day, the end of the day, they seem to weave together. That is not anymore this day and the next day and the next day. It's sort of, as if it is all a fluid, malleable thing.
That sounds like flow.
Yeah, something like flow. And I like it, It's really, I'm always astonished. Again, it's evening.
Again, it's Thursday. We have a show. And again, another show. Wow. Gosh.
You mentioned astonished. Sorry, Tom.
No, go ahead, please.
No, I was just wondering about the quality of still being able to be astonished about things. Which
still, I wouldn't say still. I would say I'm more astonished than ever, because before I expected things to be, and when they finally were like this, I thought it was my right that they are like this, you know. Well, now I'm more, oh, okay, yeah.
Well, I'm sort of overwhelmed now and then, because usually I had everything planned and organized, and now being in the moment, I noticed that there is chaos, and how do I surf it? But it is, yeah, it's a quality I haven't experienced in a long time, and I shall continue this way, being overwhelmed.
Yeah.
Please.
I want to welcome Martin Utschik.
Oh.
And he says the first ones to mentor are our own children and their friends, if we can. That's referring to the topic we did before. And if we have grandchildren, if we did not procreate, that is the root of the problem. I didn't. So I have to have other grandchildren, rented grandchildren.
Yeah, I think we just touched on a very good example of how we can't speak some things to those that are earlier on the path. I went through a transition period where it was very meaningful for me to hear and to repeat, oh, I've been heading somewhere my whole life, and this is what it looks like when I get here. Oh, I got here. This is it. Now, on the way to here, if somebody would have told me, look, you're on the way to somewhere, and when you get there, you will be there forever. Now, here, I wouldn't have gotten that. It just would not have landed. So there's a certain amount of presence we bring into the community that we can't articulate in a way that can be heard to those behind. And this is one of those. But it is that, Gene Gebser calls it transtemporal awareness. It's like, oh yeah, I'm always right here, and past is one frame of mind and future is another, but it's always happening right here. There's no place to go anymore. This is what it looks like when I get here.
Yeah.
And we're not screaming about that.
Well, it's interesting.
Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. I remember the exact moment I got that piece around always being in the moment, in the now. And I was 25 years old on a bicycle, riding up a street in Victoria, and I got it. It felt like it was one of my little kind of peak moments early on. Yeah. It's an important one.
Amen.
Yeah.
So I have another comment of Gina, and I think it's referring to what we are talking now. She says, well, even if no one seems to be listening, working out how we want to express this is the power of this group. And then she says, I have parents telling they wish I would talk to their children who are in their 20s.
You know, what about now? Now is after the hour.
It seems that we are quite still in our conversation. So.
Yeah. Well, here we are already. Wow.
So how can we, not immediately, but in the next 10 minutes, come to a conclusion, a temporary conclusion? I think it's worthwhile to talk more about these things.
I've got one short comment, and then I can tie it up for me. It is that if I've got something important to offer into humanity, it's showing up in the body of humanity in many, many other places. It's not my responsibility to make sure my insight lands and makes a difference. I'm one of the grains of salt that's going into the soup. If the soup wants salt, the grains are going to show up. And I'm just one moment in it, and each of us are one moment. And if we are what's good for humanity, the collection of that will have its impact, not any one of us.
Yeah. Good insight, yeah.
Humility. It is a little slow in coming. Yeah. But whatever we do, is out there. It just doesn't go away. Whatever we think, whatever we do, whoever we talk to, whatever we create, it's there.
And this then induces us, yes, to have a certain direction, and yes, to have a certain way to go somewhere, and not just let it fall apart, you know.
No.
But I think it's very important to use this intuition which we have gained during lifetime, out of experience, out of whatever, all the sensory yeah, it's not only the senses, it's all together, which then forms the intuition, and use that.
But isn't that also a great relief that you are not the only one? To me, this is a great relief. So, and you don't feel that you're separate. There are so many others, and I appreciate that.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to do my best. That's what I'm trying to do today without this damned camera. Okay.
It's such a shame not to see your beautiful, beautiful face.
I don't understand it, but I'll work on it.
Right.
And there was also quite a noise on your side. It was a little bit difficult to understand. It's a shame.
Well, as you were speaking, I just thought that despite myself, I have left a mark upon the world, you know, while I was busy doing something else. Yeah.
So that's what I'm rounding up. Maybe finding a new title for Gero Transcendent might help.
Yeah.
I'm going to spend some time on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and on that. On how this damn camera works. It's been a pleasure talking to all of you.
Oh, thank you, Moni. Yes. Anything else?
Susan?
Susan?
Well, yeah. I'm sorry that your camera wasn't working too, Monia. It was lovely to see your face when it was working. And I just wanted to respond to Tom's comment about the salt in the soup. I found that quite moving. And at the same time, I think I went to the place of paradox where, yes, we're just the grain of salt in the soup, flavoring it in whatever way. But also, I feel profoundly grateful for those moments of connection with individuals too. So it's like, yes, it's all a soup, and it's also very particular.
Yes, beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed this conversation very much. It's been stimulating, and I'll think about the alternative for Gero Transcendence. Thank you both very much, Heidi and Mark.
Thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
You?
Yeah. Did you have a final?
No, I do the very final. I'm here the tech guy. So.
She pushes the button. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we're at that point, no?
Yeah, okay. So I say something.
Okay. No, I do have something I want to say.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been holding my hand like this. You may have been wondering, there's nothing wrong with my hand. It's the button on the earplugs. You know, if I take it off, I can't hear you. I have to press the button down. So my thumb's getting very tired. Okay.
So not to hear is not because of age, but because of
technical problems. Yeah.
So what I wanted to say is that what is good in this period of life is, yes, you are a salt grain, but it is different than when the older ones told us children, you are not important. You are only small and not important, and keep yourself down, because we are now knowing our worth, and something is coming out also for us. We can have a good life and still being in service of others. without giving up. You know, as the sacrifice is a little bit our Western ideology that women have to sacrifice for the family or
Thank
whatever.
you very much.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, not today, though. Not
today.
today, no.
So I found it very liberating at a certain point of my life that I could do things which were good for me because they were also good for others. While before, I always thought, oh, I would be egocentric if I do that for me, you know? And so it's very good development, which I feel in myself. And I'm really enjoying doing these things. And I hope...
Like Susan said, we can live in paradox at this age.
Yes.
Yeah. Exactly. It's not so anymore. We can include. Transcend and include.
Both and plus even more, yes.
So thank you very much to you having come to the panel, and I hope we will have many more. And also to the viewers, very, very, very appreciated that you show up, and some of you even in the comments.
Thanks for the comments.
And for the future viewers, please send us your comments too. On YouTube, you can do that, but also on the page for this event. This is the wisdomfactory.net/Gero Transcendence. This URL we will keep even if we will change the name of the video for YouTube. So thank you very much and see you next week. We will talk about yoga. And self-acceptance of the body. So that will be great too. With that, I stop the broadcast.
She pushes the button.
The right button, the red one.
Everybody goes away.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.